Good morning, everyone. So thank you for the introduction, Mark. I'm a PhD student with the ICD in the University of Bucharest, and today I'd like to talk to you about education as an instrument of smart power. So as we all know, the world is currently undergoing critical transformation with nation-states facing serious political and socioeconomic challenges. A prevalent trend in today's global context is the nation-states' concern over their power and influence, which is especially significant in the face of the growing geopolitical tensions and the diffusion of power among global actors. Traditionally, the states opted for hard power tools in the framework of realpolitik thinking. However, currently, there's a growing recognition for soft power tools among scholars and practitioners. A key question today is which forms of power are most appropriate in the current global context. So this presentation is based on a paper that had a few aims. First, to provide an overview of concept of power in international relations. Second, to evaluate some of the key issues pertaining to the growing concept of soft power. And finally, to assess education as a tool of power. It's important to note that the short presentation is based on the ongoing research for the author's PhD thesis. So power is one of the most central and yet problematic concepts in social science. One of the most famous definitions belongs to Max Weber, who defined it as the probability of one actor within a social relationship to be in a position to carry his own will despite resistance. However, this attracted criticism, in particular from Roderick Martin, who pointed out that Weber did not define power, but rather provided the basis for comparison between the attributes of actors. And he also disregarded the possibility of mutually convenient power relations. So this and numerous other debates in the field illustrate the highly contested nature of the subject of power. There's little agreement about the basic definitions, with individual theories proposing their own terminology. The discipline of international relations has long viewed power exclusively in the framework of realist school of thought. So basically, calculations about power lie at the core how states perceive the world around them for realists. Realists believe that the world is a place of anarchy, where the first goal and immediate goal is always to strive for power. And hard power, obviously, is regarded as the most important attribute of power. Nevertheless, there's variation in how individual realists view power. So, say for classical realists, it stems from the fundamental human drive for power. Neo-realists state that it's actually the structure of international system that compels the states to do so. There's also variations in how the power should be conceived or measured, either through the hard attributes or in the relational manner. So it's the ability of one actor to exercise influence over others. Despite these variations, power has for a long time been treated as a prerogative of the realist school and therefore has been associated with this framework. This has partially occurred because other schools did not fundamentally attend to the issue of power, so they did not use its variables in their empirical observations. Precisely this belongingness of power to realist school has generated a limit for the concept. Nevertheless, as the discipline of international relations has been evolving, the rigid interpretation of power has also been started to change. In particular, Joseph Nye argues that the changing nature of international framework has re-emphasized the use of intangible sources of power, such as culture, ideology, and institutions. So Nye divided power into hard and soft. Hard power, as we know, is the ability to reach one's goals through coercive actions or threats, which has been historically measured by population, territory, geography, natural resources, military force, and economic strength. And soft power rests on the ability to shape the preferences of others without the use of violence. And the resources of soft power are numerous, from history, culture, arts, education, business environment, to sport, tourism industry, and much more. So although soft power is growing in its recognition, there are numerous issues associated with its theory and practice. In particular, the debates suffer from not addressing its conceptual, institutional, and practical implications. And the research done for my thesis has identified the following problematic aspects of soft power. So its conceptual ambiguities. There's a need to differentiate between the resources, sphere of activities, and agents of soft power. There's also estimation issues stemming from the fact that there's no power per capita, and also the difficulties estimating the results of the initiatives. There's currently, unfortunately, inadequate institutional and financial support for soft power in comparison to hard power, and there's a question of sustainability of the initiatives and the mentality of policymakers. So soft power can be derived from a broad range of sources, but successful leveraging it requires governments to understand what exactly the soft power assets are, whether they can be mobilized, and if so, where and how they might be deployed. Ultimately, it's important to know that soft power is not a remedy recipe for everything. Some foresee or even domestic policy objectives are better suited to soft power initiatives, while others are not. An important consideration is to ask what power is intended to be used for. Therefore, there's a decision-making process, and for instance, Palaver states that the power choice should happen in 4 steps: understanding the concepts, choosing the appropriate power choice, thinking of the effectiveness of the power solution for the outcomes, and the successful implementation of the agenda. Some people argue that soft power is in fact only a complementary tool in the international relations, and it's only necessary when it's backed up by hard power. However, one could argue that in the current global climate, becoming influential in international relations of the 21st century will require shaping narratives, setting international norms, and mobilizing transnational networks, which are the attributes of soft power. And in fact, the reality of the current context demonstrates that it's necessary to view hard and soft power together rather than separately. So, in fact, the classic distinction between realpolitik and liberalism becomes blurred, and hard and soft power often interact and reinforce each other. This is where the smart power comes in, which is defined by Nye as the ability to skillfully combine hard and soft power for the development of integrated strategies. What has been called smart power is in fact a combination of diplomatic, economic, military, political, legal, and cultural tools. So if we use this model and we see hard and soft power separately, so then the darker gray area in the middle would symbolize smart power. And actually, the argument of this presentation is that education is located in that middle section. Symbolizing that is one of the resources of smart power, which can belong to both hard and, which can be a resource of both hard and smart power at the same time. So education is soft power. Not all the soft power investments create equal outcomes, as we know, and education is regarded as one of the most effective and sustainable tools of smart power. For instance, educational exchanges are highly effective in shaping opinion, creating goodwill, and also creating ripple effects on the indirect participants. However, apart from attributing to soft power, education, and here the transformation happens from soft to smart, also has the ability to affect hard power resources, specifically economic growth through human capital proliferation. Many scholars have found positive correlations between education and economic growth, among them Barrow and all of the others listed here. So here I turn to the economics literature, specifically the growth theories. And the analysis has revealed that even the discrepancies among the existing studies can be over the relationship between human capital investments and economic growth can be explained through the different parameters that authors use, estimation methods, chosen country cases, all pointing to the fact that indeed there is a positive correlation between investments into education, human capital, and economic growth. The research also revealed that investments in human capital are efficient for both developed and developing countries, however, are more urgent for developing ones, since this will enable them to allow catching up with established markets and sustain their rise. So, to summarize, the value of soft power is rising today. However, numerous issues prevent its appropriate recognition and deployment, which includes conceptual ambiguity, estimation difficulties, inadequate institutional support, and sustainability issues. The paper has also outlined the topicality of smart power frame, which leverages assets in a skillful combination of hard and soft power. Finally, educational investments are able to impact economic growth through the proliferation of human capital, which makes education a potential resource of smart power. And the key question today, in fact, should perhaps not be whether the soft and smart power matter, but to know how and when. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aike. We'd now be happy to welcome questions or comments from all of you. So as always, please raise your hand, and then if you could just briefly introduce yourself, it's always helpful for us to know, we have another mic, to know who you are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to appreciate. I use my classroom. Thank you for this paper. I just need a short clarification on how education strides between hard and soft, as you have presented as smart. In the case of hard, coercion, force, economic strangulation, and so on. And in the case of soft, attraction, appeal, and so on. How will education now be placed in between the two? Are you talking that we are going to do some teaching about the hard as well as about the soft? Sorry, I didn't get that, please.
Thank you for your question. What I meant was, one can view hard and soft power in different ways, in different frameworks. So and this is an ongoing research, I looked at hard power resources, so looking specifically for the resources, which is population, military, et cetera, and economic strength, and the soft power resources, which is culture, arts, education, et cetera. So what I'm saying is that education has the ability to impact, to influence in particular economic strength, which is a resource of hard power. So it's through the economic strength's resources that education can belong to both that sphere and this sphere. So in a way, combining both. So it's basically its ability to influence the resources.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I love it. My question was regarding to your open question at the end, when and how. And I was thinking, okay, then we have to focus on every children to have a chance to go to school. Then I thought, oh, maybe we still have to focus on encouraging those that already went to school to go to a higher degree, so can be leaders in their groups and provide the groups where they belong to more resources because they are the clever ones. So when you were giving the data about the impact of education related to the economical growth, this data, which source of education has been taken? And what about analphabetism? Because I think we always forget that still in the world there are areas where people doesn't know how to write the name. My grandmas, I'm 49, my grandmas were born at the beginning of the century. One of them didn't know how to write the name, she just made a cross. The other one, she was able to write a few names, barely, but she was able to write a little bit. I feel very proud. I still keep a piece of paper with her signature and a message in the morning, don't forget to take that to the university. Because that means that we can make that effort. It's only 2 generations. So what about analphabetism here, which is the role, and where do you think the impact of education will be more successful? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment and question. Obviously, this is a summary of the research conducted. But in fact, the research reveals that all of the levels of education are able to impact. So primary, secondary, and tertiary. However, there's evidence that tertiary is even more efficient. This is with regards to this question. And also, obviously, yes, this topic of education is so expansive, it's so deep and wide, which is important. Therefore, it's important to conduct empirical studies. So the reason why I finished with, so it's not enough to know that smart and soft power matter, but we need to know how and when. And this is where, personally, my empirical study for my PhD comes in, and I am evaluating the educational sector of Kazakhstan to see how it works. So I think the more empirical studies we have, and the one case can, show, be significant for, say, a region of countries, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's very important to combine both theory and practical approaches.
Is there a final question, or? Okay, in the back. Last question.
Hi. In the UK, the government have just increased the fees, or recently increased the tuition fees for students. So how can such government initiatives towards education influence the soft power of a country like Britain in the future regarding education?
Well, obviously, there are a lot of economic factors that goes in it. And when studying education and applying this theory to a certain empirical study, it's very important to differentiate what we're talking about. The private sector or the public sector of educational services, which level, as you have mentioned. And these are very important concerns. In case of UK, its educational soft power is very strong, in particular through the attractiveness of the higher educational system and secondary also. So basically, the bigger the educational soft power it is, the more attractive the country it is and soft power in general. So UK is actually an excellent example of that. Same with their exchange programs, and also in particular, UK is also famous for its British Council. So British Council actually, as a hybrid of government and non-government organization, is able to effectively work in the area of education and to promote soft power of our country. Thank you.
All right, let us all express our sincere gratitude to Aigerim for the excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.